Welcome to Crossroads. A new plot of the Chinese Communist Party has been revealed through leaked documents and by whistleblowers. Now, the CCP has allegedly given orders to activate segments of its overseas sleeper agents, and it will also be using its intel agencies to feed false information to news outlets and to influencers. Now, the goal of this new campaign is to, quote, eliminate the spiritual practice Falun Gong, which, the CCP has been brutally persecuting for over 25 years. The target of this campaign is going to be global, but with a particular focus within the United States. Now look, whistleblowers provided documents in this new campaign to the Falun Dafa Information Center, FDIC. It's a nonprofit that documents the Chinese Communist Party's persecution. Now, the Epoch Times was also able to review the notes, which were provided again from these whistleblowers. And the notes was from a meeting in June this year that was held by the Chinese Communist Party's Ministry of Public Security. Now, notably, that's the intel branch of the CCP that's tied in with the secret Chinese police stations, including the recent spy case in the United States, and many of them, in fact, that have gone after CCP spies working with this agency. Now look, the CCP plan is actually pretty bizarre. Here's an excerpt from the FDIC report of detailed notes from that Chinese Ministry of Public Security meeting. Now the document states that they plan to, quote, mobilize concealed agents to create and escalate the internal conflicts of Falun Gong, to expand nonstop the fighting strength, depth, and reach of social media influencers targeting Falun Gong and Shen Yun. And it says that they, quote, must attract the continuous attention of the entire United States society and force the U.S. government to strike on all fronts, eliminating the force of Falun Gong. Now look, briefly on Falun Gong and why the CCP persecutes it, the Falun Dafa Information Center explains it by saying that Falun Gong, also called Falun Dafa, is an ancient spiritual practice in the Buddhist tradition. It says Falun Gong combines meditation and gentle exercises similar to yoga or Tai Chi with a moral philosophy centered on the tenets of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The practice was introduced to the public in May of 1992 by Mr. Li Hongshi and represents a direct and authentic connection to genuine traditional Chinese culture. It notes that as reported by Chinese authorities during the 1990s, the health benefits of taking up Falun Gong are often immediate and many times dramatic, with some patients even recovering from severe illnesses. In addition, the Chinese people recognized in Falun Gong an authentic representation of spiritual traditions which have almost been lost after decades of communist rule. It says these factors sparked a wave of excitement about the practice in China during the 1990s, and it grew rapidly across the country. In fact, it says by 1998, just 6 years after it was first introduced to the public, official Chinese records estimated 70 to 100 million had taken up the practice, making Falun Gong the fastest growing and most popular form of Qigong in Chinese history. But then this happened, it says. In 1999, witnessing its exploding popularity, a few leaders in the ruling Chinese Communist Party launched a systematic campaign to, quote, stamp out the Falun Gong spiritual practice and violently suppress the tens of millions of people who practice it. For the past 25 years, millions of Falun Gong practitioners in China have been subject to police harassment, abduction, imprisonment, torture, and death in custody. It also notes that furthermore, untold numbers have been killed and their organs extracted to fuel a booming multi-billion-dollar organ transplant industry in China. They're being killed for their organs. All the while vilifying propaganda inside China, as well as instances of questionable reporting in Western media that repeated CCP propaganda have marginalized Falun Gong to some extent and given pause to would-be defenders of human rights. Now look, let's go over the main points in the report and how the CCP is allegedly now planning to export this persecution within the United States. Because what the CCP wants is to not just have Falun Dafa persecuted inside China. They want the rest of the world to join in the persecution. The problem is, of course, there's no reason to persecute it. So they need to manufacture false information and incidents to instigate that. And that's the new plot. The Falun Gong Information Center says this: newly leaked credible reports indicate that the Chinese regime has made a strategic decision to escalate its persecution against Falun Gong worldwide, expanding its propaganda, disinformation, and transnational repression activities to target Falun Gong more aggressively outside China, and especially in the United States. And it's a central tactic in this revigorating battle is mobilizing the resources of the Ministry of Public Security, again, the organization of the CCP that runs some of these, overseas Chinese police stations, the secret ones, and also, quote, other Chinese Communist Party entities to fully support social media influencers to attack Falun Gong and Shenyun Performing Arts, a classical Chinese dance troupe, many of whose performers practice Falun Gong. It says the regime is also poised to, quote, activate a network of embedded spies, including people who they've had infiltrate Falun Gong and start practicing or pretend to, in an attempt to decimate the spiritual practice globally, especially in the United States. It says as well this appears to be the CCP's end game to finally destroy Falun Gong. Now, it also notes this, that according to information leaked in June 2024 from the Ministry of Public Security meetings, the regime's goal is to, quote, fully eliminate Falun Gong worldwide. And also they say to cause the closure of Shenyun Performing Arts. Now, it notes that information leaked in July of 2024 from another source outlines a similar strategy to deceive global internet users about Falun Gong, and they want to base that on documents from the CITIC Foundation for Reform and Development Studies. That's a Chinese state-run think tank. The CCP runs it, and it's also a funding institution. Now, it notes that in practice, online attacks have indeed increased since early 2024 and constitute a significant escalation to the 25-year persecution campaign against Falun Gong, signaling a strategic shift in the CCP's prioritization of Falun Gong worldwide as a target. Now look, on this, the Chinese Communist Party has actually run similar operations to this in the past. In fact, I've uncovered and reported on several of them. Back in the day, 2008, when a lot of my work started as investigative reporter, the Chinese Communist Party was launching attacks against Chinese dissidents outside of China, including in the United States. That was right ahead of the Beijing Olympics. And part of that campaign was, the CCP wanted to silence any voices that would oppose, the CCP during that time. They were even going after Western media. The CCP was coming out in full force, launching an information campaign against the United States. And that, of course, required, in their minds, to silence anybody who would point out the CCP's human rights abuses during a time when the CCP was on the center stage. Now, look, at the time, because I was reporting on it, there were whistleblowers telling me that whole operation, when they were launching attacks against, Falun Gong practitioners and human rights activists and democracy activists in many Chinese communities, they were beating them, attacking them, threatening to kill them, spitting on them. It was bizarre. According to whistleblowers at the time, the CCP's plan with that operation was they wanted to make it, basically part of their whole normal operation. And their plan was, if they could succeed in that, if they could succeed in, mobilizing overseas networks to attack people who speak out against the CCP, they wanted to make that the normal way of doing things going forward. And the way they were framing it was, oh, that's just conflicts among the Chinese communities. Chinese people their feelings are hurt when you insult the Chinese Communist Party. And talking about human rights abuses, this hurts the feelings of the Chinese people. That's how they were framing it. And so they were saying, how dare human rights activists talk about the abuses in China? How dare people talk about religious suppression in China? How dare people call for, democracy in China? Because they wanted to frame it that there's two sides to this and the other side will fight with it. They wanted to normalize the ability to launch attacks. And of course, what we uncovered at the time, a lot of my own reporting, was that the CCP was actually behind those attacks. The attacks are being done through the networks, tied in now with what they call these secret Chinese police stations. We found the Chinese consulates had direct involvement in instigating and encouraging the attacks. And we found out also the organizations launching the attacks were tied both to again, the Chinese Communist Party's United Front and to the Chinese Mafia. They were using criminal groups to do it. Now, actually, we've been told several times throughout the years that the Chinese Communist Party even has annual meetings every single year on how to destroy the Epoch Times, because they also regard us as a threat to them. Because again, we expose the things they do. And the CCP, they also have plans to manufacture and amplify disinformation. Now, I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree, one of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The Chinese Communist Party has a new plot to manipulate the United States and to export the CCP's persecution against Falun Gong onto American soil. Now, Falun Gong is, of course, a Chinese spiritual practice which the CCP has been brutally persecuting for over 25 years. And even though it has launched campaigns like this in the past, it has not succeeded in exporting the persecution. But now they have a new plan. Whistleblowers have revealed how the Chinese regime is targeting the U.S. government, media, and online influencers in its efforts to, quote, eliminate the spiritual practice. One of the methods they utilized is the manufacturing and the amplification of disinformation. And I mean real disinformation, not the kind of politicized stuff they talk about these days. Actual Soviet-style disinformation. Now, this is what these leaked documents say. This is how they describe it, according to the Falun Gong Information Center. The first tactic, they say, is amplifying disinformation and anti-Falun Gong content. They say the Chinese officials from the Ministry of Public Security, again, the CCP branch that runs these overseas Chinese police stations, that branch has given orders to provincial departments to provide resources to 2 YouTubers in the center of recent online attacks against Shen Yun and Falun Gong on social media. It says that includes support from the 50 Cent party accounts. The 50 Cent army is the CCP's army of internet trolls. Basically individuals who just get paid, very small amounts of money for internet posts, but the CCP uses them to amass, support or opposition on the internet. The CCP wants to use the 50 Cent army to back these propaganda accounts spreading false information to vilify Falun Gong. It says the CITIC Foundation, a Chinese state-run think tank and funding institution, has issued instructions to share defamatory information about Falun Gong with foreign media, news outlets right here in the United States and elsewhere, and to manipulate search engine results related to Falun Gong. Because, if they can get the media here reporting false information or CCP disinformation, then that, of course, goes into the search engine results. This is part of their plan. The next step, they say, is the activation of CCP agents. It says officials have ordered the activation, right? They've ordered it. The activation of an extensive network of overseas agents and within the Falun Gong community, CCP spies who have infiltrated them, especially in the United States, it says, to provide content to the above YouTubers and take other actions on behalf of the regime. The goal is to spread falsehoods about Falun Gong and Shen Yun, provoke internal divisions within the Falun Gong community, and otherwise destabilize organizations founded by Falun Gong practitioners from within. Notably, the Epoch Times was started by people who practice Falun Gong. It's one of the reasons why we can talk about a lot of things with the CCP that others really can't figure out. We are an anti-communist newspaper dedicated to telling the truth. The CCP does not like that. And note that some of these suspicious individuals interviewed by this Ministry of Public Security supported YouTubers fall into this category. And so what the CCP is doing, in other words, sending spies to, take up Falun Gong or pretend to. And then after they do it, to then pretend like they're going and blowing the whistle and they're releasing false information. To go and maybe get a job at Shen Yun and then leave and then spread false information about the organization. What appears to be, in other words, an affiliation with the organization, then works as credibility for the false statements. This is classic disinformation tactics and classic tactics that the Soviets used notably to destabilize groups that would oppose the Soviet Union. It's the same repeat of old tactics. Now, one of these YouTubers, notably, he used to work for Chinese Central Television, right? CCTV. He's like a former CCP propagandist, moved to Japan. The other one is an individual living in the US, Chinese individual, and this individual has actually made death threats against Shen Yun and is actually facing some criminal charges on gun charges. That's who these individuals are. And so what's happening now is the CCP is trying to use them and amplify them in order to, again, be voices of this false information that they're feeding to them. Now, it also notes there's a strategy that attempts to turn the U.S. government and American society against Falun Gong. It says, in addition to undermining the reputation of Falun Gong and Shen Yun within American society, the regime and its agents also plan to incite divisions between Falun Gong and the U.S. government in an attempt to instigate a U.S. government-led crackdown on organizations founded by Falun Gong practitioners. Now look, this approach actually follows almost the exact methods the Soviet Union used to attack and silent dissidents during the Cold War, as I briefly mentioned. One of the methods they would use is, imagine, for example, you had a legitimate organization. There's people opposing the Soviet Union and its abuses, and they're trying to expose the gulags in Russia and the abuses and genocides, right? They would have spies go into these organizations, and they would then try to manufacture divisions. The spy would say, I believe that we should do this instead. Or they'd point out moral flaws within some of the other individuals to make people turn against each other. Then they would get other individuals who were also Soviet spies to begin voicing support for their new opposition within the organization. These individuals voice support and they say, we should get behind him and this person did this, and that causes more people to come or for doubts to take place. This is a common tactic of every communist regime in order to break up any kind of dissent, in order to infiltrate movements and destroy them from within. And the other method they have now, to then also have individuals infiltrate the organization and then, leave and then spread false information about it, also creates another problem. Or to, for example, cause problems or even legal problems, commit incidents and so on, in order to spur investigations based on what these spies have done. Imagine it's like sabotaging an organization from within. You do something, you create maybe even a crime or something like that. You make somebody investigate it, and once they investigate it, the individual who is the spy sabotaged something, then they're able to start tearing it down. Or at the very least, it defames them in public society. And of course, further creates those divisions they're trying to manufacture. These tactics work in unison with each other. This is a common tactic that every communist regime has used against dissent. This is a normal way they do it. And notably, this is also how actual disinformation works. Now, the Soviets, again, they also did this. Real disinformation, not the politicized disinformation. Real disinformation works by manufacturing fake information or false incidents, right? False flag incidents and that kind of thing. They then use information in the footnotes, right? So imagine, for example, you have a movement and then you have a false flag incident. They then use that incident in the footnotes of a larger narrative. Well, this person came out and spoke to this YouTuber and said this happened. And then this incident took place, which was a false flag that validates this claim. And then, of course, they build that, using their agents to create different incidents that form the footnotes which then create larger arguments. Then they have their agents of influence promote these larger arguments, which might be, true based on the false incidents, but not actually true. And it's in this way that they manufacture false narratives, which then feed into larger narratives, which then they approach news organizations or other, government entities within a country with in order to destroy them. This is how the Soviets did it. Now look, the Soviets would even often establish fake nonprofits or think tanks. And it's interesting now that we have evidence that a Chinese, CCP state-run think tank is involved with this. Because what they would do is they'd manufacture reports. They'd create false information in these reports. Then they would provide those reports to news outlets or influencers, or in this case maybe, not at the time, but now YouTubers and so on, in order to create noise. And look, it seems like the CCP tactic in this case has a few parts. One is to activate sleeper agents within the groups they're trying to tear down, targeting Falun Gong in this case. Have the sleeper agents act out to cause incidents and smear their image, and then have the sleeper agents pretend to flip and then start feeding false accusations to their controlled influencers or friendly journalists and other news outlets. They're manipulating the entire system the CCP has formed, for false information and this type of thing, in order to attack a single group, in this case Falun Gong. And then it seems the CCP has also this noise campaign, as I mentioned. It plans to try to bolster the reach of all of this, right? It wants to bolster the reach of all of this using fake accusations from the 50-cent army, using other tools, pumping up claims on social media, using others under its influence to keep spreading the false information in order to make it louder. They have agents to amplify the channels and to spread it and share it and so on. They're again using social media for this new one. And also it seems there's a more direct tool involved where a key CCP think tank, as I mentioned, and the Chinese regime's Ministry of Public Security will both be feeding disinformation to people who start spreading this false information. And so once they create a hole, they'll drive it with a wedge and try to make it bigger, in other words. Now look, the report also notes something else that's pretty serious. It alleges that there are some ties with the New York Times to this CCP plot. The New York Times has been working on a hit piece right along these same lines, and notably, the individuals tied in with this campaign overlap with the influencers the CCP is using for its disinformation campaign. I'll be talking more about these alleged ties only on EpochTV.com. So if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, there's a link in the description below. Click on that, get access to the rest of this episode, as well as our whole library of hard-hitting documentaries and shows on issues that really matter, like the Chinese Communist Party's 100-year plan to defeat the United States. The CCP is one of the biggest threats to America. They're using things like propaganda, video games, entertainment, movies, culture, to subvert and influence the next generation. This unrestricted war against our country is one of the scariest but least understood issues of our time because it's not tangible. It's all being done through soft power means and ideological subversion. Now, I've spent over a decade investigating the CCP's subversion, and it's such an important issue that I made a documentary called The Final War that exposes the CCP's 100-year plot to take down America. If you'd like to find out more about what exactly the CCP is plotting against this country, watch The Final War. You can find the link in the description below, and I'll show you all the trailer before we go exclusively to EpochTV.com for the rest of this episode. I'll see you there.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.